For the past few years, I have used July as an opportunity to participate in One Book July and run an experiment to see if there's something that might work better for me than my current system. But this year, I decided not to participate in One Book July because I already have a planner system that is working really well for me. This is my Midori Hibino. You can see that I've been using it very well since the beginning of the year. And apart from a few complaints, I really don't want to change my system just for the sake of participating in One Book July. But it is really fun to think about what else might work for me and see if there's another system out there that could potentially address some of my complaints with the Midori Hibino. So I thought in today's video, I would just talk you through some of the options that I have been considering as what I might do if I were to choose a different system in the future. Because as much as I love the Hibino and I'm leaning towards continuing in this system for next year, it's just fun to think about what else I might do. And I do get bored easily. And I also don't really switch my planners in the middle of the year because I do like having everything in one place. So this is kind of my opportunity to exploring the possibilities without actually committing to a different system. And I thought I would just talk you through my thought process and show you some of the experiments that I have done. And I'd love to get your opinion because I know it's early to be thinking about 2027, but I can't help it. And also I saw that the pre-order for the 2027 Hibino has already gone live, and I think that also kind of triggered my initial thinking of like, do I want to pre-order this? Is this something that I want to be in for next year? And I guess it kind of kickstarted all of this experimentation. So before I make any purchase decisions for next year, I thought this would be a better way to use up some of that next year planner energy that I have been feeling in the last few weeks. I do have some notes, so, nope, wrong page. I don't really have an agenda, but I did use one of my spaces to make some notes on other planner ideas that I have been thinking about. So I think what we'll do is I will start by talking about my current system, and I'm not going to do a full flip through because I just posted a very long, over an hour long video where I kind of went in depth into how I'm using this book this year. I'll just talk about how I'm using it, what is important to me, what I would ideally like to change if I were to switch to a different system. And then we'll explore some of the other systems that I have been thinking about. So to start off, this is the Midori Hibino. As you can see, it is a very chunky book. I usually have it housed in my Poder Stroll. This is a Hobonichi planner cover that was released last year in the 2025 planner lineup. But I just took it out of the cover so you could see how chunky she's gotten. I don't really use a lot of stickers in here, so I've tried to keep it pretty lean, but even just with adding pen, you can see that it does fluff up. And just to compare, this is my A6 Hobonichi Techo from last year. And this one, I was a little more open with adding ephemera and stuff into this book, but it was still mostly a pen-only book. And you can see the difference, even in the spine. It is like double the size. And that's before you add anything to it. So, for the most part, I really love this book. I did do a lot of setup before I moved into this. It gives you monthly calendars, and then it goes right into 2 pages per day. And my favorite thing about this, well, I have a few favorite things. What I really love about this is the fact that it is 2.5 millimeter grid, which has made such a difference in terms of how much I can fit into this when I need to take a lot of notes. I love that it is cream paper, and I love that it is the very thin Tomoe River paper, which I just love as a planner paper for me. Having said that, it is quite a thick book, and because of that, I sometimes feel like this is quite a big book to be carrying around in my purse. What helps is the fact that it is A6 size, so it doesn't feel as overwhelming. I think if this were an A5 size, it would definitely just be too big for me to carry around. But having it be in a smaller size definitely helps. And in terms of my weeklies, what I've done is for every Sunday throughout the book, before I moved into the book, I set up weekly verticals so that I could use this for my weekly planning. This was meant to replace my weekly supplement, which I was using last year as a way for me to plan. So when it comes to like complaints or things that I would ideally love to change about the Hibino, is that I really miss having my weeklies all together, bundled, so that when I plan, I can use the notes pages to just quickly flip pages and be able to make plans for like future dates. And I just found this a lot easier to plan in this way. I have tried to use the monthlies before, but I don't know. I've just always had trouble using the monthlies. So I really enjoy planning by week. And I just find with this setup, it's a little more difficult to flip to the next week because I kind of have to, flip a few pages to get to the next, like few weeks. So that's just a very minor complaint, but that is one thing that I have been struggling a little bit with the Hibino, but it's not a huge deal because I do use a digital calendar as well. So for the most part, between my digital calendar and then my weekly, I'm pretty much able to keep on top of things. And I guess the other thing that would make me switch to a different planner system in 2027 is just the fact that this is such a big book. On the one hand, in my hand, it's actually very comforting, I think, out of the cover, which is kind of making me think maybe I will use this book without the cover for a while just for a change. But it is really, it's pretty heavy. And if you were someone who wanted to add a lot of stickers and ephemera, like this could potentially be like quite a thick book. And I think that's fine if it's a desk book, but if it's something you want to travel with, then it just makes it a little less accessible. And I'm someone who wants to have all of my stuff with me at all times because I use this thing to take notes when I'm at the doctor's office, when I'm at the vet. If I come across a recipe that I want to try, I do a lot of health tracking in here. I really love how this book can really be like my one book for my whole life. And there's just so much space. Like you can see there's lots of empty pages and I'm just having a blast going back in and filling in all the empty spaces. It really feels like this is like a big puzzle that I'm working on for 2026. And over the year, I'm kind of putting the puzzle pieces in. And at the end of the year, I'm going to have this beautiful book full of memories and notes and life things and just lots of things that I think, have such a great time flipping through in future years. So basically, I love this book. And I didn't want to do One Book July and switch to something else because I kind of feel like I'm already in one book. Having said that, I wondered, is there anything else that I might want to try in future years? Because I could see a world where I get maybe the undated Hibino and use it as mostly just a notebook, because I think that would be really fun. And then I would want to move my planning into something else. And I was wondering, like, is there a more lightweight kind of option that I could potentially move into for next year? And so if I could make up a book that I do not think exists, it would be basically the Hibino, except it would be set up like the Hobonichi Cousin. And this is the book that actually got me realizing that paper planning could work for me, because up until this point, I had so many planners, so many paper planners that I had tried in the past that just weren't really, they felt more like a chore than they were helpful. And it felt kind of like this memory of being in school and being given a planner at the beginning of the year and just using it because it was there and I felt like I was supposed to. I did find Planner Piece first in a traveler's notebook system where I used one insert as a monthly calendar, which actually didn't get used that much. And then I had a second insert that I used for like bullet journaling. And so that actually was the first time I realized that writing things down actually helped me remember to do them, because I think prior to that, I would kind of write down tasks but never revisit them. And it always just kind of felt like I was writing things down for the sake of it. The Cousin allowed me to start to visualize my day in a way that I couldn't do without seeing it on paper, if that makes sense. So it allowed me to see meetings, and it allowed me to realize like, oh, this is why I'm not getting any work done, because I have all these meetings and these little time slots in between. It helped me be a little more realistic with how my days were kind of getting planned. I'm sorry, I think I'm going to have to blur out the majority of what's in my Cousin. This Cousin was before I had a YouTube channel, so there's absolutely no censoring going on here. But basically, I found that this was the first time that planning really, really clicked with me, having this vertical weekly. And so this has really become the foundation for what I look for in a planner. I know not everybody thrives with vertical planning, and I could see how it would seem overkill for some people, especially if you are in the type of job where you have a lot of meetings with other people. And so using a digital calendar probably makes the most sense for you. But for the type of work that I do and the variety of things that I do, I just find that weekly planning just keeps me sane. And the fact that I was actually able to discover that about myself feels like a win, because it can be really easy to try other methods and think maybe there's something wrong with you because it doesn't work. But once I clicked with this, I realized like this is what I needed. And that has been really helpful for me in terms of actually understanding how planners can be helpful. So anyway, I love the Cousin. I love the fact that it is monthlies at the front, weekly verticals for your weekly planning, and then 1 day per page for the rest of the year. And I absolutely adored using the Cousin that year. So I did a lot of sketches. I took a lot of notes for meetings. And at that time, I was still in school. So I was able to take a lot of notes in here when I was in classes, that kind of thing. Nowadays, a lot of my meetings have much more confidential information, so I couldn't really use this for work notes as much as I had originally intended, simply because I want to keep these and archive them, and I don't want to archive them if they have information that I would need to delete. So I really loved the Cousin, so much so that I did get one for the following year, but I didn't end up staying with it for last year because I then downsized to the Hobonichi A6 original and weekly supplement. And so I basically used this very much in the same way. Used the daily pages for meetings, to-do list, and then any notes. And then I used my weekly to plan out my weeks so I could see very easily what I had going on that week, and it just kind of allowed me to plan my energy levels as well accordingly. So this system was pretty much like Planner Piece for me. I really loved this. until I kind of fell in love with the Hibino because I was still using other notebooks like the Cousin for taking notes for longer, like if I wanted to take notes on things I needed more space for. And I just found that if I was just using this as a planner, this was plenty of space. But if I was trying to take notes from, life things, like I mentioned, doctor's appointments, anything that I knew that I would want to reference for my life, but also if I was just reading articles and I wanted to take notes on them, I just didn't have room to do that here. And although I love the idea of having a separate notebook dedicated to it, these are on me all the time. And when inspiration strikes, I love being able to just pull out this book and just be able to use this. So it's less complicated, and the barrier to entry for noting down whatever is inspiring me in that moment is much lower when I just have to think about pulling out one book. And so I eventually decided for 2026 to move away from this system, even though it works so well for me, so that I could really consolidate a bunch of different books I was using into this one Hibino. When it comes to my must-haves, I find having a list is helpful because there are so many options out there. And while I would love to try all of the options out there, I have to have something to work with so that I can help narrow down my list of things that I would want to try, because I can't possibly try every planner system out there as much as I really am tempted to. And so here's kind of like my must-have list. And I know that I'm not going to get all of these things with every option, but I think at least it helps me narrow down to try to find the options that, kind of check most of these boxes. So what matters to me is that it's portable. And what that means is it's A6 size or smaller, or this is a consideration. This is technically like taller than an A6 is the Hobonichi Weeks, but it is thinner, so I still consider it to be portable. I really prefer cream paper, and I find that really helps minimize my consideration set, because I guess most people prefer white Tomoe river paper, and I just happen to prefer cream paper. And so in a way, it makes my choices like a little easier. I'm in love with small grid. I thought I loved the Hobonichi A6 grid, which I think is 3.7, but I don't know if you can see this. Here's a recipe that just goes over to this page. And look at this recipe. This fits all on one page. And so having this smaller grid makes all the difference in what you're able to fit, considering these are both A6 pages. So I really love this small grid, and that is proving to be really difficult to find. I love having a vertical weekly, and so even though this book didn't come with a vertical weekly, there were so many pages that I was able to repurpose my Sundays to be my vertical weekly, and that didn't impact how much space I had at all. So that was really great. Lots of space for notes. Even for this video idea, I went back to May 1st and I found a little space, and this is just perfect for taking notes. I would ideally like my months, my weeks, and my dailies to be grouped together. So I kind of wrote here, basically, I'm just chasing the Cousin in small form, because I've realized that format really works well for me. I want it to lay flat, so you can see here I have no problems with this Hibino laying flat, considering how thick the book is. I think that's amazing. And ideally I would have 1 year in a whole book. So I know there are a lot of half-year options out there, like the Hobonichi avec. I just have a preference for having my whole year in one book, because I often go back and I refer to things like some of these collections at the front. I refer to them all the time. I have notes from earlier in the year that I refer back to later. And as I mentioned, I like to go back and kind of fill in empty spaces. And these weekly verticals end up being really lovely mini memory keeping elements for me. So if I ever want to go back and kind of see what was going on, like I like to just flip through my pages, and it can lift my mood sometimes because there's a lot of really like great happy stuff in here. So those are kind of my things. With that in mind, I have looked into other planner options, and now I'm going to show you some of the things that I have played around with, and I would love to get your thoughts on them, and maybe I will consider one of them for 2027, or maybe I will end up back in the Hibino anyway for next year. I've never been able to really use as a planner, but I love how small and compact it is the Traveler's Notebook Passport. Currently, I'm using this as a coconut journal for just housing my thoughts and feelings around my dog that passed away in March of this year. And I've used it in the past as a wallet, but I've never used it as a planner. I have bought the Traveler's Notebook dated inserts before, and they've just never really worked out for me. So I've just not had a lot of success using this. But I recently put in 3 inserts just to see like how chunky this thing would get and how that would feel. And I don't love how this sticks out, but it's good to know. I think 2 inserts is probably my limit for what I would put in here. There's 2 passport options that I would consider. The first one is the Sterling Ink Vertical Weekly Passport. I believe they have, I think it's a compact version, if I'm not mistaken, at least from 2026. And it looks like it has monthlies, vertical weeklies, and then notes pages in the back. And I was so tempted on buying one because they're now discounted to see if it could potentially work for next year. But I've just held off because I don't really want to move away from this year. And I've also heard that the Sterling Ink Vertical Weekly, because they're thicker books, they can sometimes stick out from the passport. So that's something that I do think would bother me. So if any of you have used the Sterling Ink Passport insert, let me know what you think of like if it fits inside here or if it sticks out a little bit. I'd be very curious to know. But that is a very interesting option because it does bundle the months together, the weeks together, and then there's lots of notes pages. So I could do a lot of this note taking potentially in the back. And I love how compact this would be. Like this would fit so easily in any purse that I put it in, or it could even fit like in a pocket. I do really like that. It is white Tomoe River paper, but I wonder if maybe one of the options next year could potentially be Koji paper, which I think is a little more creamy. And the grid is not as small as this. So despite it being a smaller form, I think the grid is still kind of big. So that might limit how much I could fit. So that brings me to my next kind of experiment was I said, what if I got an insert that was passport size, which is about the part that's not colored in gray, but I had a 2.5 millimeter grid. I know that Good INKpressions does allow you to customize the grid on the inserts that you buy. They have a passport sized 68 GSM cream Tomoe River paper passport option. And I thought, what if I were to order those, but request a 2.5 millimeter grid? So assuming that's possible, I believe there's a larger option that could potentially fit a whole year's worth of weekly verticals. I tried it out and I think this is totally doable. So it would be smaller than my current weekly, but with that small grid, I could still write everything that I need to write, assuming that the grid looks the same. So I added some margins around the side here just to account for just in case I don't have that room. But I do think that I could make it work. So this is a very compelling option because I could essentially create my own weekly vertical but it would be cream paper, and it would probably, it would still be just one insert. So if I know that I only want to have two inserts, then I could potentially do weekly, like a weekly vertical insert, and then possibly another insert just for notes. The only thing that I think I would be missing is having a monthly view. And even though I don't really use the monthly, I think there's something about just always having it there that I appreciate. So I would have to play around with whether I could really fit 3 inserts comfortably. Maybe it could still, I could get it to fit without it sticking out if I just played around with it a little bit more. But that's something that I am thinking about. I don't know how I'd feel with 3 separate inserts, because I did have my very first setup with my TN standard. I had a monthly, I had a blank grid, and I think I might have had a weekly, or I'm pretty sure I had 3 different inserts, and it didn't work. So that's something to think about. But very intriguing. I didn't buy the Good INKpressions inserts just because I don't know if this is something that I would realistically do. And they are kind of expensive. Shipping is pretty high, and I think it takes a while for it to be made. So it's not something that I think I would buy unless I was sure that I was going to do it. But if I did, I would try to get the 2.5 millimeter grid. So those are the 2 like passport options that I considered. So the next one that I looked into is, what if I were to use the Hobonichi Weeks? Because it's cream paper, the entire year is in one book, and it is still quite a slim book. This one is getting thicker because I've been adding a lot of stickers and stuff to it. But I did have some spare pages in the December months when I didn't use the weeks, and I thought I would just experiment with a couple of options. So the first one would be to create columns and essentially create a vertical weekly using the entire weekly spread. The first problem I ran into was the fact that there's no grid on the left side. So I tried my best to add lines to continue the lines over, and that was so annoying that I couldn't imagine doing this for the entire year. But I at least decided to commit to doing it here just to see what it would look like. So I would potentially have my Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then I would have a stacked weekend because there wasn't really enough room to have Saturday and Sunday here. Then I tried to add a timeline on the side, so it goes from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. And then the bottom here would be, probably I would use it for meal planning, and then I could use my weekly vertical to plan out my meetings for the week. This was really distracting, just seeing the timeline right next to the dates. So I'd probably have to cover these somehow, and I think this would create a bump. So I don't know that I love that. So I don't really love this layout at all. I couldn't see myself using this for an entire year. The next layout that I experimented with was potentially moving this way and using the already gridded pages for the vertical weekly. So you can see here, I've got Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So it fits well because it's using the same spaces as this page. And I was able to get 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. I'd probably even do 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. because I don't usually need to worry about my timing before 9 a.m. I don't usually have meetings before 9 a.m., but I do sometimes have meetings that could go as late as 8 p.m. So I think that's how I would do it. And it would be, I would just have the timeline here, and I was able to kind of have all my meetings. And I think it could be really interesting if I used the grid pages for all of these, then it would just be a matter of I'd be able to kind of flip through each week and kind of plan that way. Unfortunately, there's not enough room for notes, so I think that might bother me a little bit if I need a space to kind of add notes. So I don't use it all the time, but I always love to have this space to add notes just in case. So I think I would miss that. And then when it came to my to-do list, I thought I could do my weekly meals on the side here. And then I experimented with trying to add my to-do list in this space. And even though this is just a practice and this isn't really real, I used some of the days from some of my actual to-do lists from this Hibino. And you can see like I ran out of room. It's hard to write in a straight line because there's no grid here. And this is actually how a lot of planners that I have tried to use in the past have their setup with, you know, like this horizontal weekly. And as much as I know this works really well for other people, it just does not work for me. And part of that is because sometimes I need to be so granular with my to-do lists. Let's just call it an accommodation, like an ADHD accommodation. But sometimes I need to write things that may be completely obvious to someone else and they don't need to write it down, but I need to write it down. Like I need to write down, remember to do your timesheet, or I need to write down the names of the people that I want to write Happy Mail to as part of my Patreon. I need to remind myself to do some of these really tiny tasks, like create a thumbnail for a video. It's partially because I need to see how many things I have to do so that I can be more realistic with my time. Because maybe one person might think, oh, I need to finish my report. But to me, that could be like 5 minutes of time. It could be 2 hours of time. I'm not really going to know until I break it down into like, okay, in order to finish the report, I need to finish the first draft. I need to do an edit. I need to do a grammar check. I need to, I don't know, I need to make sure my formatting is good. You know, like all these little things that I need to make sure that I do. And so my to-do lists have often just been way too long for a space like this, which is why I kind of thrived with the bullet journal approach where I could just have as much space as I wanted. And then even in here, I loved having just a vertical space, and I could always kind of bleed over to this side if I needed it. And sure, I didn't need it every single time, but I needed it enough that to know that this vertical, like this horizontal, would not work for me for the whole year. I know some people use this side instead for having longer to-do lists. I could maybe use that, but I also don't want to force, like I don't want to be constricted by a planner layout if that's not going to be, if I know that my planning could be better in a different layout. So as much as I really wanted this to work because I love the Hobonichi Weeks and the idea of just having this one book is so, it just feels like such an ideal book to have with you, I realized that it's just not going to work. I mean, having said that, I'm just thinking aloud now. I guess I could potentially try having this kind of list in the notes pages instead, so then I'm not constricted by space. But then there'd be like a lot of flipping around. But I mean, I guess I would have to do that anyway if I had my weeks bundled and my dailies. So this could still be an option, I guess. I don't know what I would use this side for then if I used this as my timeline. And the other thing is like, do I really want to be like constantly flipping this way to do my planning and then kind of like flipping this way to do my planning? It just kind of feels like a lot of, I don't know. It just feels like so many steps when I could just have a planner that's always oriented this way on my desk. And, you know, it's just a matter of like flipping pages. So I don't know. Let me know what you think. If there's any other layout that you think that I should try for the weekly, let me know. I guess one thing that I haven't really explored is the Hobonichi Weeks Mega. I've never had one before, but I don't think there's enough weekly pages in the back to do a full year with this kind of layout. But I guess if I had the Mega, I could potentially do my weeklies in the back. But then I don't know what I would do in the front. Like, I just don't think this horizontal layout works for me. If I just didn't have really long to-do lists, or if I didn't need that extra space to really get so granular, then it would work. But I don't know. I just know that I've tried this layout for years in other planners and it's just never worked. So I don't really think I should force myself to use something like this if there's another system out there that is just going to be more suited for me. So I don't think this is an option, but I have space to experiment if I do want to try. Okay, the last option that I have considered for next year is the Midori Hibino. I think it's called a free diary, if I'm not mistaken. And basically it's an undated Midori Hibino. So it's got the cream paper, the small grid, the small form factor, but because it's undated, I could set it up the way I want, which is all my months at the front, then followed by my weekly vertical, which I agree would be a lot of work, but I did it for this book. And I mean, I'd be willing to do it again if I needed to. And then I could have my dailies, and I probably wouldn't have enough to have 2 days per page because I'd be using so much space at the front for the monthlies and weeklies. But that's fine with me because I don't think I always need 2 pages per day. So I could see a world where I just do 1 page per day and then maybe just a bunch of notes for leftovers, kind of like the Common Planner style. Or I could do 2 days per page, but then weekends would just get 1 page. Like I would do Saturday, Sunday to see if that works out for the rest. So I think that could be fine. The only downside is that I would still have like a really thick book, and that's fine, but it does sometimes feel a little overwhelming. Until I have a more clear idea, I think I'm not going to buy anything. I think the hesitation with the day free is I really love the fonts and the colors that they use for this dated one. So I actually really love like so much about this book. So I just wish that they would come out with the Hibino, but 1 day per page, and maybe adding the weeklies at the front. So it would be a different layout, but I think if they could do like monthlies, weeklies, and then 1 day per page, I feel like this would be, like half the size. And then I think it would just be my perfect book. I think that is everything that I thought of. I mean, I put here other planner idea, A6 weekly supplement, exactly what I did last year, which I could definitely do. It worked really well as a planner, but I did also need like other notebooks to supplement, and I just find that I don't really need other notebooks when I have this, which is kind of a good thing and a bad thing, because as someone who loves notebooks, sometimes I just want to use another notebook because I love trying new things, and this has so much space that I really don't need anything else. But it has my whole life in here, and I've really loved it. And even though I have lots of blank spaces, I don't see that as a bad thing. And I'm really curious to see how this book looks at the end of the year. That might also play a role in what I decide to do, because it is surprisingly getting chunky, despite the fact that I don't really add too much to it. So yeah. Okay, well, that is everything that I had to share with you today. If you are a fellow tiny grid, cream, Tomoe river paper lover, let me know if there's any other options that I haven't considered. I would love to just continue experimenting, even if it's just a thought experiment and that doesn't cost any money. I would love to hear your thoughts. And if you are already thinking about 2027, then let me know what you're thinking for next year. Are you going to do the same thing? Are you thinking about changing things up? What are some options you're considering? If you're still here, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you're doing well, and I will see you soon in the next video.